it's actually pretty concerning. I saw like there's like a Hannity. You're familiar with the American conservative pundit Sean Hannity, or
No, never heard of him.
okay, so this is a guy who is okay. Have you heard of Bill O'Reilly?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, okay. So this is basically like right under Bill O'Reilly.
Ah, right.
So yeah, one of the most popular conservative like firebrands, I guess you can call them, in
Right.
American like political talk.
Mm.
And so these conservative types, they're like always looking for the next like alarm bell to like sound, the next like
Sure.
moral collapse that's right around the corner.
Yep.
And so this dude did a series, like a multi-part series on the horrors of American spring break at I think it was like I, th- I think it was like Daytona Beach or something.
I don't see any horrors, not from the Girls Gone Wild videos I've seen, mate.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, like the funny part is that
Yeah,
so and I'm cracking up at this the whole time, but it's
yeah.
also like kind of worrying because
Mm.
then they brought on this like panel of commentators, I guess,
Yeah.
and they're talking, and it's they're talking about how so supposedly there was like some massive gang rape or something that took place in the middle of this Daytona Beach, and everybody was watching, and they were all just too bombed or stoned or drunk to care, apparently, right?
Right.
Sounds fishy, but whatever. I reserve judgment until
Sure.
I know further detail. But so they're talking about that, and so it's like this giant like I told you so, I told you so moment. And then you have these conservatives on there, like the commentators that he brought on, and they're talking about,
Mm.
you see, this is the real rape culture. We, again, unlike the left, we're here protecting women from actual rape culture. And it's just like, man, just like my alarm bells were ringing when I heard that shit, because it's just like,
Yeah.
I'm predicting that within the next few years, Spetsnaz, like,
Mm.
especially as like I predict not only just like hit pieces on MGTOW, but
Yeah.
on men in the manosphere in general, as like we kind of
Mm.
gain more notoriety. And I think that I could be wrong on this, but I think that the right is going to put not just the left, but the right wing is going to pull out
Mm.
all the stops, and like really just kind of, it's going to be just one big giant battle for who can protect women better at the
Sure.
expense of like red pill men. So I'm just worried about it. I might actually do a video on it.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
I think what we have here is temporary. What we have, this kind of freedom that we have on social media, I think it's fleeting. I think they're going to crack down on it. I think
absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
it's going to happen.
yeah. How do you think? Any predictions as to how it's going to happen?
Um, well, I heard that YouTube is doing a cleanup. That's going to happen in the upcoming months. So certain videos that aren't getting, I guess, enough viewers or enough subscribers or however they work it,
Yeah,
that they're going to sort of clean house. So I'd imagine they could do it under that veil. They
yeah,
could
yeah.
start taking us quite easily.
Definitely, definitely, and even the most watched like
Mm,
MGTOW channels aren't getting like millions of views.
no.
And I don't know if YouTube's gonna make it so that all that's left is like PewDiePie and all these people.
Yeah. I just discovered his channel. I think you made an allusion to it, or someone did. But yeah, my God,
Yeah,
it's completely inane. It's completely pointless, but people enjoy it. So
yeah, I guess. So, let's see if we can't get to
sure.
some of these inquiries that people wanted to. For the people listening, we're going to kind of do this as a semi-structured interview, so we can go off on a tangent whenever we want. But there were a lot of questions that we wanted to get addressed, to have addressed here today by Spetsnaz at the request of my subscribers. So we're going to just get in it and see if we can't put some of these inquiries away here. Spetsnaz, are there any that you want to address
Sure.
first and foremost, or?
Sure. There are a few questions just around attachment trauma. and transference and that sort of thing. I touched on that in my last video. I was beginning touching on in terms of just how it can play out in later life, and how it was the case with my personal experience. For me, I mean, it was an incredibly difficult transition, to actually begin to associate emotion and also touch with affection. And I know that it's the same experience for many men, and it plays into that fear of just being manipulated or abandoned. And we all tend to do this to an extent, but if you come from a traumatized background, you really do idealize any partner that you associate with, and you build them up into a fantasy figure.
No.
And in the process, I'm sure girls would have done this with you at some point. So they really do project really unrealistic demands or expectations on you.
Yeah.
And when you fall short of that, they get pretty critical. They get very angry. And we've seen cases where they get extremely violent.
No.
And that's a result of having essentially no coping strategies. So in turn, you just rinse, cycle, repeat. It's just repeating the same cycle over and over again.
No.
And you're sitting there. It's like a prone animal in the corner. It's like learned helplessness. You're waiting to be rescued. You're waiting to attack. You're waiting to criticize. So, I mean, there was something that someone said to me a number of years ago, and I didn't understand what they said at the time, but now I do. It was, he said that there comes a point in your life where you have to essentially take responsibility for the wrongs that you're not responsible for. And essentially what that means is it's your responsibility to heal all your past hurts. And that doesn't cut off anger. I mean, we have a right to feel anger, a great deal of anger over how we've been treated, especially men. And feeling that anger, using it constructively, I mean, that can be a very, very powerful healing experience. And that enables you to move from that learned helplessness to empowerment.
Talk about because my experience with this has been a lot of times, I would meet a girl and like you said, women sometimes tend to like idealize the man that they're with, and I what I found was I would go through this stage where a woman would see me as like I guess the pinnacle of manhood for a while in the beginning stages, and this is something that I think is not just the initial courtship or romance phase that you go through in the beginning. It was something even more exaggerated than that. But then as the relationship would progress, some of these women would go ahead and try to recapture that, and when they would see slowly but surely that you're just a human being, they would again slowly but surely start to take little jabs at you, make these little comments here and there that are designed to systematically break down your emotional well-being. And how do you recommend that men deal with this? Because a lot of times it leaves men that are blue pill, that really aren't versed in the art of understanding how to take back your masculinity. What is the basic advice you would give men, maybe not even MGTOW, but men in general, in terms of how they can deal with this kind of rejection and this kind of tendency to like ping their identity towards the female approval, and when that goes away, the devastation it can wreak on the male identity. Sure.
I guess from my perspective, I don't really come at it from the perspective of offering advice. It's the difference between consultative and prescriptive. Best way to get someone to adopt an idea and actually apply it to their life is to essentially get them to believe it's their idea. But there's a process involved there. But what I'd say with men, I mean, with you, I don't know what your personal situation is like with your girlfriend. I'm sure it's rewarding in a number of aspects. But I mean, the majority of men, we don't get what we really need from women. What men want, they want, and they need a relationship with a woman without anger or criticism.
No.
We want to be wanted. We want to be respected. we want to be acknowledged, we want to be needed. But with women, their perspective on men, and this is coming from my experience, from the experience of other men that I've worked with as well. Women, they see men as a blank slate. And it can be very similar in the relationship dynamic between a therapist and a client. They essentially project onto this blank slate. And in the process, it dehumanizes a man. And women, they think men don't need or appreciate, time spent together or what have you. And they're showing a man that he's needed. They believe that if they show that, the man will run away. He'll perceive it in whatever way they think will lead to him leaving the situation. But what we want, we don't want manipulation. No. And we don't want to be a mind reader. We don't want to play these games or be pressured into things that we're not comfortable with. Or, essentially take the blame when she acts in a way that disrespects you.
Yeah.
So I think with women, they have these preconceived notions about men that they don't want to communicate. So women are very happy just to put that man in a little box in the corner and forget about him. Yeah. And, so they can get all the attention, and so his needs aren't a priority. And great, that works for women. And a lot of this is subconscious. But, and a lot isn't, actually. We need to attribute more blame to women in some regard as well, just in terms of taking personal accountability. Oh. But I guess due to women's view that men don't care, or that men are superficial, that the only way for a man to get his needs met is, by using a woman for sex, they take the exact same view. They believe that the only way that they can get their needs met is by manipulating a man. And when women believe their man doesn't need to be acknowledged or valued, women then only tend to vocalize or verbalize criticism at men. So it's kind of a nasty cycle.
Well, maybe that's, maybe there's something in regards to that behind how we do treat men or boys who, for example, are taken advantage of sexually by older women, right? Or teachers or women in positions of authority. Maybe that has a lot to do with why we kind of sweep it all under the rug, because we're just assuming that men only care about sex, and if we only care about sex, then we can be dehumanized in every which way, and according to society's whims and desires, because we're getting what we want, right? We got laid, so big deal, let them sort the rest of it out. But I think that's really interesting what you said about the projection, right? Sure. I've had, and this has been well documented in the manosphere, it's not just me, instances where women sometimes want to, show a boyfriend off to their friends. And so one of the biggest rituals in relationships, I think, and in interactions between men and women is when they meet her girlfriends. Right? And you see you see these poor guys, they're like, they don't want to be there.
No, they don't.
Right? And it's just this like giant uncomfortable ordeal where he knows that if he doesn't say the right thing or do the right thing, eventually they're going to talk shit about him, and that's going to cause trouble between him and his girlfriend. And it's just a giant, a clusterfuck of just unenjoyable shit, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've all experienced that.
Yeah. How have you dealt with that in your previous relationships?
Oh, my previous relationships have just been a scrap heap. They really have. Okay. I guess I'm at the phase now where, I've got a lot of things on the go at the moment. And that's working in tandem with other men. So relationships with women, they've gone on the back burner. Doesn't mean that I'm not open to it, but it does mean I'm aware of certain things and what I will and won't put up with. But I think with women, like you say, they have a lot of beliefs. They have a lot of notions about men that are just completely inaccurate. Oh. They believe that men are selfish. They believe you'll cut and run. With men, we're trapped. We're trapped in a place where we can't express our true needs without fear of criticism. Mm-hmm. But here again, we've talked about this at length. Women never go to the source to actually seek the answers. Would you have a conversation with a blank slate? Of course not. Mm-hmm. So women, whether consciously or subconsciously, I mean, like you say, they break men down, and a lot of it's subconscious, but they rob men of their self-esteem. They rob men of their goals, of their drives, their ambitions. And, women think that men don't care because women have never looked at it from a man's perspective. And you look at someone like Warren Farrell, who I have a great deal of respect for, but he stated that women can't hear what men don't say. But women have never even bothered to ask.
Sure.
So, like you say, women go on the attack. They criticize men. They feel entitled to dictate, what's appropriate behavior, what have you. And that's why you can get an entire studio audience of women applauding and Sharon Osbourne with that Catherine Keogh episode.
Yeah.
Because right at that core basis, women resent men. Because that's what criticism is. I mean...
you have to ask yourself...
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have to then wonder, when you witness that, right? When you witness a bunch of women laughing at that, at such a horrible...
Sorry, no, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yep, no, it's okay now.
Sorry, okay. Sorry, I must have moved out of the way of the mic here. Let me just adjust it slightly. But, when you see that giant audience of women kind of just laughing at such a horrible thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's actually a bit scary when this dawns on you. You have to have... See, I think men to a much greater degree than women possess the ability to take themselves out of their situation and place themselves in somebody else's shoes. And so when I saw that, I did that. I don't try to just anger. I'm past the anger phase of MGTOW, so I don't try to just, lash out in anger at everything injustice that I see regarding men. I try to understand it, right? And so I tried to put myself in the position of these women who are laughing at this man who was castrated violently, right? And it dawns on you then that not a single one of them tried to put herself in his position. Otherwise, they wouldn't be laughing, right? And then you have to wonder whether or not this is just the default state of the human female. That is
Mate, we're breaking up. Sorry, mate. We can go back and just edit that part out. It's fine.
Yeah. But can you hear me? Am I breaking up right now, or?
No, this is fine. This should work, hopefully.
Okay. All right. So I was just saying that, you have to wonder when you see entire audiences full of women and they don't question how they would feel, right, in this man's shoes. You have to wonder whether or not the default state of female psychology is to ignore male suffering. And if that's the case, then we're dealing with a whole other problem altogether, and it's not going to be solved by getting rid of feminism. I don't know if it can be solved. But, with all that said, I want to kind of move on to the next question here. And that was a question that says, let me see if I can find it here. This one says, how do we gain the courage to not pretend to be blue pill men? So, as you know, Spetsnaz, in society, there is people are sometimes openly hostile towards men expressing red pill thoughts and red pill ideology. What advice do you give to men that want to kind of take this out of the internet and start directly challenging people and confronting them on their gynocentric sensibilities? Do you do this in real life, or do you tend to kind of stay because you know what the consequences that are going to come with it? How do you approach this in your own life, and what advice do you have for the men listening?
Sure, it's a really interesting question. I actually said you made reference to this. Somebody made a comment on your video, the preview for our podcast, and they said, "I really don't want to disrupt the mystique of Spetsnaz," and I can understand that, but they intrinsically know that I don't talk like this 24/7. I mean, the way that I approach my videos, I try to have same approach as I would having a very deep, personal conversation with another man. But how I approach things in my everyday life, I approach things with a lot of levity, with a lot of humor, because humor is a social lubricant. At the same time, I'm very, very aware of the dangers that are out there. In terms of how you gain courage, I often think of there was an interview with Billy Idol years ago. It was decades ago. I saw it on YouTube, and the interviewer, he asked him, he said, "What is punk?" And Billy Idol, he stood up and he beat the shit out of him, and he walked out. And I mean, you can look at figures in social media or what have you, but one of my favorite musicians is someone called Iggy Pop. You'd know of him, but
I've heard of
I've seen him. Yeah, I've seen him live twice, and he's like an animal on stage. I mean, it's like pure animal energy. People refer to him as the boy who was raised by wolves. But Iggy came up with the theory. He coined it. He calls it brat theory. It's essentially when you're difficult with people, it's a way to protect yourself. And if you do that, they'll respect that. So, if you're very open about what you want, and if you let people walk all over you, they will. Yeah. And, I mean, with me, in my everyday interactions, I've got a lot of carryover. If you think about strategies that you adapted when you were younger, I bring a lot of that into my everyday interactions still, even though I'm not aware of it. How I walk, how I interact with people, things that I still do. Like I'll be talking with someone and I stare right through them. Yeah, it's a constant fixed gaze. I don't look away. And it's a very powerful means of communicating with people. And in essence, it's kind of like crossing a social taboo. And it causes people to open up. It causes them to trust you. And that's carryover behavior. And a part of it, it's me watching their body language. Analyzing if that person is a threat or not. And also how they perceive me. Not due to me living up to their expectation of who I should be, but so I can essentially adapt my approach to get what I want. Yeah. And also it's a sign of me showing respect. Yeah. And that's a strategy on my part, and it's subconscious. And the human body and the mind, it's very adaptive. But after I came out of my coma this few years ago, I really realized that everything could be taken from you. They can take your ability to function. They can take your ability to walk for a period of time. They can take your finances, whatever. But I mean, they couldn't take that small space between my ears. Yeah. That little section of grey matter. Yeah. And when you're laying there prone, you realize how much you've actually neglected that. And I see a lot of men today, and you're talking about blue pill men. These guys, and you hear them every day. I know you've talked about it in your videos before, about guys that you work with, or nether apes, how we address them. But you hear the conversations. They say, "Oh no, I'm just a male," or men are just dogs, or men are just pigs, or whatever, or how I'm not a deep thinker, or that you're just a basic guy. But I'm a basic guy. My schooling was piss poor, but I got by adapting. I'm self-aware. I analyze everything, and if you don't, you're running on autopilot. Oh. And if you accept that all you will ever be in your own opinion is just just an animal, or just a simple guy, then you're not open to growth. You're limiting yourself, and that's what you talk about. That's gynocentrism at work. That's self-limiting behaviors.
Well, I mean, and as much as I kind of rag on these guys, I do sometimes, or maybe in the future, I'll kind of do videos designed to like extend an olive branch to these people, because it takes so much to like get the traditional worker drone, if you want to call him that, the nether ape as we call him, to kind of break out of that you almost can't, you can't fault them, because they half the times they don't even know what they're doing. They're behaving not as an autonomous human being, but as a collection of cells that is kind of, going through the motions of homeostasis and just essentially living to reproduce. And that's what, at that point, bacteria lives to reproduce, right? I mean, you're not actually living, you're existing, right? The sentience has gone away, and I think that's one of the most important or destructive aspects of gynocentrism that we need to focus on, is that it is a sentience retardant, right? It is not conducive towards thinking. And I mean, all of these men Spetsnaz, I'm sure, grew up with dreams, right? There was that section
Oh yeah.
have you read The Manipulated Man or?
Oh yes. Yes,
Yeah,
the
there was
one.
that section there where, Esther Villar, she's talking about how all of these men at one point would probably go to some pond somewhere and collect tadpoles, and he wanted to be, a herpetologist or somebody who studies amphibians or whatever, right? And when he grew
Right.
up, but turns out he was able to become proficient at, I don't know, the example she used was the piano, so they became a pianist or a
Right.
politician or whatever. And in between that space, there's a space where a dream was kind of killed, right? A dream kind
Mm.
of evaporated and had to fall by the wayside because he ended up having kids. He ended up whatever, having to support a family. I still remember when I was 17, 18, or around there.
Mm.
They have this airport. It's just like a local airport where, and at that age, I didn't own my own car or whatever, so I would just take the bus system around here. And
Yeah.
I got on the bus, right, and I wanted to take a pilot lesson. So they give you this pilot lesson where you pay them like $50. They let you taxi in a single engine Cessna. They let you
Mm.
kind of pull up the throttle to take off when you guys go off the runway. I flew over my house. Interesting, fun stuff. And as I was taking the ride back from the bus, or taking the bus back to my house, my parents' house,
Mm.
the bus driver told me, he saw and he saw that I got off at the airport, and he asked what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, yeah, it was my biggest dream to get my pilot's license, but I
Yeah.
had a kid, and
Yeah.
it just there's a dream. What's the word? A dream deferred, right?
Mm.
And it's just sad to see that, right?
Yeah.
So there's always this small, I guess, inkling or kid, like tiny bit of dream that has been evaporated away in men that are 30, 40, 50 years old that have families, but they always
Mm.
hold on to it, right? And I think the
Yeah.
key towards getting men to kind of reject gynocentrism is appealing to that dream, you know.
Mm. Absolutely. It's funny. People level a lot of criticism. I know at you, and a lot of the other men that make content. But the fact is, right now we're setting a precedent.
No.
We're setting a precedent that other men will follow, and there's no leaders. But we are doing a lot of content that's going to assist men and bring them to a level of awareness and awakening. That's what happened with me when I watched your video, the post-feminism man. And it's a shame because the first word that most children learn is the word no. And it really is a shame how many men forget the power of that word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once I came out of that coma, I realized that power. Yeah. Changes had to be made.
It's
You know,
interesting that you say the part about the one thing that people can never take away from you is that space between your head,
oh yeah,
right? And I just think that's the most important thing that men have to concentrate on is the gift of the mind that they've been given, and to never let that dull or atrophy.
absolutely.
Um,
It's funny,
Go ahead,
but
Spetsnaz.
no, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I've been around the block, and from my perspective, there was always a very deep hole, inside me that it sucked away all the joy. Yeah, but now I'm filling that hole, and I'm able to do that now because I'm actively seeking it out. Yeah, right now I assume different hats, different roles. I'm sure you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm a student. I'm a mentor. I'm an apprentice. And if you get yourself into that space, you're in a perpetual learning process. And it's a process of transition. And that to me, and I'm just this is my definition. I'm not labeling it or sticking it to a wall and saying that's what it is. But what men going their own way is to me, it's constant flux. And we may want it to stay still so we can label it, but it won't. And what we're seeing now, and we've seen it in your recent video as well, we're seeing more men speaking with other men. Men rallying, supporting one another. Because I know I can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And if a man can arrive at this point, he can cast off all the bullshit, then he can change his life. And that change, it's going to be something he defines for himself. But yeah, no one else's opinion, it means a thing. But yeah, I know there are men out there hurting, who are wrestling with urges, with with loneliness, whatever. And I wrestle with them too. So,
well, that's actually a question that people wanted addressed. Is well, I'll just read it, word verbatim here. There was a request, Spetsnaz, that you cover. It says verbatim thoughts or advice on dealing with existential anxiety, as Ben in MGTOW. Existential in terms of being isolated, lonely, learning to tolerate things, etc. How do you deal with these feelings of aloneness that all men have? What do you do to kind of put them aside, or how do you approach that loneliness?
Sure. I mean, the one thing I'd say, and it's one thing I've learned, is you've seen key phrases like OPM, OPT, OPK. It's other people's money, other people's time, other people's knowledge. But it's the thing is that men don't have to go it themselves. I've been down that road. It's miserable. Mm-hmm. It's painful. And they say rock bottom is the best foundation to build a house on, but it doesn't have to be that way. And you can look at men out there who you define as a social success. That guy can have his shit in order. He can be respected. He can have a very active, engaged life, but it doesn't mean his needs are being met. It doesn't mean he's aware. It doesn't mean he's addressing those needs either. So, I mean, you can do it yourself. And I see a lot of men on here, online and in society, that go it alone. But it's just going to lead to more isolation. And that's what they want. They want men divided, not learning from one another. They want men not communicating with one another. And it's something I see online that when you talk about blue pill men, you talk about white knights, it's men tend to be quite weary around these guys, and that they don't tend to approach them or communicate with them. And I can understand that. And I don't blame a man for that. Because
just quick, you said men tend to be weary around these guys. You're talking about, I guess, red pill men tend to be weary around blue pill men, or could you?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, all right, continue.
And I used to be the same, just because of the experiences that you had with them. But that man's values may not be in line with your own. But that doesn't mean you can't still learn from him. It doesn't mean that there's still no learning opportunity there. I mean, you wouldn't reject a man based on his religion or based on, some other belief. No. But, I mean, that man can still add value to your life, and likewise you to his. And the example I'm thinking of is basically in the prison environment. The greatest transitions that I've ever seen men make inside prison are when they assume the role of mentor. Suddenly they can pass on knowledge. And for a man who's been fed messages his whole life that he's shit, that whatever he says or does is wrong, that he's a failure, whatever. When he's put in the position of mentor, his confidence, it goes through the roof. He wants more for that person. He wants to help. He wants to make a difference. And especially, to let that kid know that not to make the mistakes that he made. Yeah. And that's a process where you start to identify causal links, causal triggers. You gain insight into experiences. You become aware of the reactions you have. Yeah. And it's a thing that we're reluctant to reach out to them, and that's understandable. We've been taught that reaching out for support is weakness, and that we need to do it ourselves. We've been told that since day one. Sure. But we underestimate how much value, we actually add to another man's life when he's able to assume the role of mentor. And we've got to get out of that mindset that we're placing an imposition on another man. Yeah. We've got to break out of that. Because when a man passes on advice to you, he feels empowered, he feels value, and he will want to help you more. And this is an age-old sales technique. I mean, they've been using this for decades. And, it's not just with men who come from abusive or violent backgrounds. I've had mentors, and I still do, guys who are very successful, in a lot of different markets. I've built up over the years a very wide network of men, from backgrounds, businessmen, tradesmen, community workers, medical professionals. And these are guys that I communicate with regularly. And I know I can rely on them, who impart knowledge to me on a very regular basis. And you can come from a completely different background, but we benefit each other in terms of exchanging information, exchanging perspectives or life experiences. And that's a network of support. It's not casual friendships. It's built on an exchange of information and active engagement. And that is the key. As far as I'm concerned, that's the key to male empowerment. It's utilizing your networks. It's making it work for you. Because when men exchange information, when they actively support and work with one another, great things happen. Because you create your opportunities by asking for them.
Sure. Well, you see Spetsnaz, like, for example, when like the NASA videos or even the European Space Agency videos, when they finally, and it's all a group of like men, I mean, let's be honest, there's like the occasional woman there, and great, I think that's great, but it's usually just a group of men, and you see when they finally touch down on Mars or start orbiting, sure. I don't know, some faraway gas giant or something, some of these guys break into tears, right? And like out of just sheer joy of the accomplishment, right, and the teamwork. Right, and I think that it's just extremely important. Men value being able to mentor other men and take inexperienced men and showing them what they've learned. And I think that men, in general, in terms of our species, just take a distinct pleasure in sharing information, and that's what leads to those great things, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And again, you see, like you said, when you get even people in the prison system who really probably their lives are at a point where they don't really have a lot to look forward to, right?
No, right.
They're doing time, and the outlook probably looks pretty bleak. But you say they light up and they get enjoyment out of being able to impart knowledge onto other men. But what I've noticed, Spetsnaz, and maybe you can shed some light on this, is that I think that when you see this, especially in the prison, only in the prison system, I've witnessed this. When you see men imparting knowledge onto other younger men, it takes usually two forms. The form that I see that it takes, number one, is the productive one, where it's just kind of a quiet exchange of ideas, genuine teaching, genuinely passing on knowledge and skills, and maybe in a trade or whatever, right? And then you have these kind of made for TV scared straight programs, right? And I mean, I actually saw one of these things, right? And it was a young white kid, right? Couldn't be more than like 16 years old, right? And so this is on TV, right? And they're showing this kid, and every time they showed a different case or whatever, they would show on the little sidebar like his offenses or what got him into the the program in the first place. And it was like racist sentiments, vandalism or whatever, right? So they take this white kid, right, who's whatever. I don't like racism; it's shitty, but they take this white kid and they put him in a prison with these like giant, like extremely angry like black dudes that are like right up in his face, just screaming at him. And I'm thinking like, this is not gonna fucking work. This is gonna make him more racist, right? So it's just like. I just noticed that like I think that is when I saw that, immediately I thought, this is for female audiences than it is for actually transmitting male knowledge from men to other men, regardless of race, right? Because you have to understand that a lot of these racial divisions, and I'm sure you know this, these racial divisions that we have are based in some inherent properties of tribalism, but for the most part, men don't like conflict with each other. They don't like kind of separating each other from race. And once you get them to that point where they're sharing identical experiences that they had, even though they come from different walks of life, they tend to get along a hell of a lot better than women do. You know?
Absolutely. I've seen that countless times. Not just in the prison environment, but in other group settings. You can take people from different cultural backgrounds, different socioeconomic stratas. But yeah, it's something I'm seeing now, and I did predict this. Probably predicted this probably about a year ago. That we're going through a process now where we're actually building up a structure of support. If you're seeing a group dynamic, you've got usually around 6 to 12 weeks with a group of men who will work together on their issues. They'll gradually begin to build rapport. By the end of that 6 to 12 week period, they'll be openly sharing, what their goals are, what their ambitions are. If a problem gets presented to the group, they'll work in unison together. The facilitator, they can take a step back. Okay, you guys do it. And it's instinctual. They work together. But that collaboration just drops off after the group disbands. And then they go back to the dream killer. They go back to the wife, go back to the partner, and they don't stay in touch, and they lose perspective. And the wall goes up even harder. Oh my God, I opened up. I said this about me. And then they feel fear about that. They feel resentment over it. Tends to go that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they're in the thick of it, this is something that we hear from like Vietnam veterans or men that have been in it's talking about, these are my brothers, I die for them, and they actually mean it, right? They actually mean it. But I talked about in one of my videos about that scene from Saving Private Ryan where you have like these group of men that are in the thick of World War II, right? Extremely violent, that would genuinely die for one another. But then you get this big dramatic scene where Tom Hanks is talking about, well, if being here earns me the right to get back to my wife, right? And it's just, and that's like the most dramatic speech of the movie, right? So you have these men going through just unimaginable, and Saving Private Ryan did not do the horrors of World War II justice by any stretch of the imagination. I mentioned this to you before, but I've been reading up. I don't know what's going on with me. I just decided like that for some reason World War II documentaries help me to sleep now. So I've been doing that, right? And I've been watching like a lot of World War II documentaries and reading books on Stalingrad and the Battle of Stalingrad. This was a battle where 1,000 men a week were dying, or I'm sorry, a day were dying. So it's just like the horrors of World War II is just unimaginable for somebody who hasn't been in warfare. But they genuinely mean it. They would die for their comrades in arms. But when the war's over and they get back to home or whatever, they kind of forget about it and they lose contact with their friends. And it's just really sad to see. How do we harness that? And how do we keep it going?
Yeah. All right. You reminded me of a quote I read years ago. It was Sebastian Falk's Birdsong. And he said, I've met men I would trust in the mouth of hell. So I would trust them to breathe for me and to pump my blood with their hearts. I thought it was very melodramatic at the time, but you can understand his perspective, I guess.
Sure.
It's coming from working with a unit of men. But I mean, what I've seen online, the transitions that I've seen, I haven't been here long. I started making videos around the end of 2013. But like I say, I've witnessed these transitions before in groups, and the shift is very rapid. And it's not surprising that men are working together to actually seek answers and to define the boundaries. We've seen this recently. Men have been putting up saying what they will and won't accept, what defines their group, what defines their tribe, where they stand, and then they try to employ this new awareness. And by doing that, they're reaching out with one another. They are rallying for support. And I think online, what we have is something quite precious, because, like I say, that those groups disband. Well, we don't have this. We don't have this issue with social media. I picked up the phone today and I called you.
Yeah, yeah.
You cross the ocean, it's no problem. We can talk about these deep issues. Other men are going to listen to this, and other men are going to have their own ideas, their input. We're going to talk with other men about this. So there's no cutoff point, so far at least. So it's a question of how do we keep this going? Because if social media cracks down on what we're trying to impart here, then that could present an issue. But you're taking precautions right now with your website, and I'm sure other men have other ideas. But we've got something quite special right here. It's a little nucleus that can expand. So
Sure, sure. Excellent point. Here's a question I wanted you to specifically talk about. Okay, so the question is how one could reach violent men and boys, right? It's very easy to kind of turn our backs on men that are so far into various forms of like self-deprecation and self-destruction, right? It's very easy to turn our backs on them. It's very convenient to say, well, we don't advocate violence, so we can't deal with this gentleman. But these are the men sometimes that need the most help, right? And the men that could potentially be pulled back. I mean, and you know, everybody wants to act as though we're all just, you know, saints or whatever, incapable of violence. But if we were put in some of the cauldrons of you know, of struggle that some of these men were put into, we'd be leading very different lives right now. And everybody has, I think, a situation where they look back on it and they think, well, shit, man, that could have been close. I could have gone to jail for something stupid, and who knows what would have happened there. What if I was raped or whatever? How would that affect me psychologically speaking? Would I be the same person? No, I'd probably be one of these guys, right? That is having difficulties, is lashing out even violently sometimes. How do we reach out to men and boys that are having, and keep in mind, I'm sure you know this, these are men that are, but from the rest of society deems as like untouchables, right?
definitely.
How do we reach out to them, because they're still men, right?
Absolutely.
And how do we reach out to them and help them? Sorry about that. Let me
Tell her to call back.
Yeah. It's my mom. I'm gonna yell at her later.
Man time.
Sorry about that, Spetsnaz. Continue.
Okay. Well, I guess it's no different. It's communication between men will always be the same mode and formality that we tend to have. But I mean, it's no different to how we perceive men going their own way. Just bring it back, because we're online at the moment. So, perceiving them as a bunch of Xbox playing neckbeards, or however they describe them, and same with inmates or convicts, like you say, lost men. Instead of actually looking at them as men who have experienced pain, who have experienced abuse, who real poverty, real hardships that we can't even comprehend. But with more men actually sharing experiences and claiming their right to their pain, that perception dies off. But it's a question of how do we make, how do we warm people to the idea of seeing inmates or ex-convicts in a human light? But I mean, in terms of giving value to men, there's things that I've tried in the past. I can talk about boxing. I'll talk about it later on, I think, just in terms of like visualization and how you approach it and how that's helped a lot of men I've worked with. Also martial arts, systemic philosophy and things like that. But I actually saw recently a piece on the news. I can't remember what current affairs program it was on, but it was about this young army vet, and he'd lost his genitals. They'd been blown off in a blast. He'd lost, I think, both legs. He lost an arm. He'd lost an eye. The parts of his body was just gone. And as a result, you can understand he'd lost his will to live. And there was this biker, this Hell's Angels biker. He's a real hard nut. And he made it his life's mission to give these veterans meaning. So I saw it. He took them up mountains. He wouldn't allow them to give up. No. And this young guy, this young veteran, I mean, you could imagine everything on his path was just a major obstacle. Things that we'd take for granted. And there was no quit in this kid. This was his mission. He was going to ascend this mountain or die trying, and he did it. But with this kid, this young veteran, there was no quit in this kid. He made it. He made it up that mountain, and the sense of accomplishment that he carried on into his life. Now he's not just surviving; he's living. Yeah, and you can look at it like PET, prolonged exposure therapy. It's the same dynamic. You know, he claimed his reality. He claimed his pain is real, and he accepted that circumstances won't change. And that's how we keep allowing ourselves to overlook the shit we put up with, because we don't actually give it a name. So in terms of adding value to men's lives, it's actually a far simpler process than we actually give it credit. In terms of getting people to interpret or view these men in a different light, that's the real battle. But if you look at things like, say, I do a lot of boxing classes, and I never knew. I teach a lot of boxing classes. I never knew that was a gift I could impart to younger men. But basically, you get them in the ring, and they don't understand that the mental process is 95% of the battle. And people don't understand before you actually step in the ring what that process is, and how it can actually, bring a sense of a level of self-awareness. But basically, before you even step foot in the ring, you've got to visualize what your goal is. And when you're doing that visualization, you feel that with your emotions, you feel it with your senses. You get a full experience of that. Like if you're walking to the ring, what do you see? You see the crowd. You feel the heat, the energy from the crowd. But you can't focus on that. You need to focus on the sound of your own footsteps. You need to feel the lights. You need to feel the crowd, You have to visualize a whole fight, from bottom to end, how you want to approach it.
Why do you think that boxing elicits such? It's almost like, especially with younger. I mean, this is like one of the most successful programs I've seen with like inner city youth and youth in general is like boxing gyms, right? Where these men can get together, get some of their anger that they may be having out in a physical way against each other in a challenging way, but then end up still end up building friendship and bonds with one another. Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can talk to young men, and they don't understand the talent that they have. I've seen some guys in the boxing ring. You wouldn't believe how good they are. It's like watching magic. And their self-esteem is in the gutter. And basically what I do, I step and I try to reconstruct that sense of self-esteem to see themselves in a new way. Because we're conditioned. We're conditioned by our past, by all those negative messages that people have told us. So you've got to learn a way to actually cut that out by building up self-confidence, by utilizing visualization, by getting some focus, understanding your body and the reactions inside your body. Because boxing, it's all about getting to a place through setting those goals, through visualization, also overcoming your fear, to a place where you actually believe in yourself. You look at fighters. I mean, if you ask someone the process that a fighter goes through after they get knocked out, they'd look at you blankly. They wouldn't understand it. When you get knocked out, you have to reinvent yourself. Look at someone like look at Mike Tyson. I think he got knocked out by, Lennox Lewis? And he came back with a big moko on his face, a Maori tattoo.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I was going to actually just ask you about Tyson. I think he's kind of a tragic figure in boxing, and really indicative of exactly what you said. I see him as like kind of an individual who had really just in the gutter self-esteem, but a phenomenal talent and ability to like you've seen him. He would like go into the ring and destroy people, literally.
Oh yeah.
And but I just feel like he was just serially taken advantage of. I don't know if you've ever saw the. I mean, if I'm sure if you're a fan of boxing, then you are very familiar with Tyson's kind of eventual unraveling, I guess you could call it. And I don't know if you remember where he was saying all that stuff about Lennox Lewis. He was going to eat his children and all this crazy shit. But really, when there was a point when he was in that rant where he was saying all this crazy shit. Oh, I'm impregnable. I this and that, and you could see the actual point at which I believe Mike Tyson has a bit of some kind of mental illness, right? And you could see where that mental illness took over, where he was like talking about all this trash talk and this and that, and he kind of pauses and he kind of looks dazed for a second. He looks around and he says to the interviewer, he says, you know, what do you want? You know, what, right? And that really stuck with me, right? I believe it was the Lennox Lewis one, but because it shows, I think Tyson, if you really observe him, it shows that he has like an outside persona and then he has an inner monologue that he's struggling with, right? And I think people like who was the gentleman's name? His manager. Oh man,
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Mike Tyson's manager, the shady Don King.
Oh, right.
Yeah. You know, people like him just serially took advantage of him, and he was just kind of like this. In some respects, I see him almost as a boy that was struggling to like kind of be accepted by people, and he finally found this talent that he could impress people with. But even still, he was just kind of taken advantage of and put in the meat grinder. You know.
Yeah.
What are your opinions on Tyson? Any opinions on him or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's no different. I mean, what Tyson went through in his childhood, in terms of the trauma he experienced, it's like anybody else experiences trauma. He hasn't come to an understanding of it. He hasn't formed a cohesive narrative. Yeah, I talked about this in my last video, how if you're in a household where the parents' behavior is erratic, you can't develop a strategy. Because you imagine it, if you're dependent on someone else for your survival, it doesn't matter if you're an infant, you're still going to develop a strategy to get your needs met. So you understand what the situation is about and what to do in order to get your needs sated. But you can't do that in that kind of environment, so you can't make sense of what happened. When Mike Tyson is in that kind of state, he's basically disassociating. So he doesn't understand his own reaction. He can't make sense of it. There's no strategy for him to fall back on, and it also shows a lack of focus as well. He lost it near the end. I'm not sure if he suffers from mental illness as such. It could be deemed as one. But if you look at someone like Mayweather, I'm not going to comment on the outcome of the fight because I'll probably get shot. Did you watch the fight?
I didn't, I knew what was going to happen. I knew Mayweather was just going to kind of run around the ring. My little brother, there was like a party at one of my little brother's friend's house and he invited me. But basically I just knew, I think that Pacquiao is the better fighter, but Mayweather, he knows how to win in the most boring way possible. And so I actually think that it's killing the sport of boxing, but whatever, I guess that's a conversation for another time.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's an infuriating fighter. I mean, the way he gets his opponent on the inside, he leans on them, he grapples with them, he pushes them, he lifts up his elbows, he uses them as guards for counter blocks, the way he rolls his shoulder, in the ring. But he's very irritating. But I'm not commenting on his character or his perceived character or the outcome of that fight. Just getting me out there. But if you actually listen to what he says, what he reflects is the true mindset of the perfect fighter, mentally, physically. He's like music in the ring, the way he moves. But you listen. He said something on Twitter about Pacquiao. He said that his prayers go out to the Pacquiao family. That he hopes that the love of boxing will bring Pacquiao back. And if you read between the lines on what he's saying there, if you can't keep doing something that you love, it will eat away at you. And that's what boxing is. He said a lot of other things as well. Things like a true champion can adapt to anything. Or if you fight angry, you'll make mistakes, and you can't make mistakes against a fighter like me. So here's a perfect mindset and perfect visualization process of a fighter.
Look, I gotta say, he is driven, right? He knows what he wants, and he goes to get it. And in many respects, he's a great fighter, but he's he knows he's probably just doing it for publicity in a lot of respects. That he knows how to say some infuriating stuff. But I also, and as much as I like this fight was very good at kind of polarizing people and kind of it was like a good versus evil, but where evil was the evil that you love to hate type of deal, but very charismatic and all that. So there was that plus side to that. But then Pacquiao was kind of portrayed as the great good, the saint or whatever that's coming to to slay Goliath or whatever, right? And so, but
we need that. We need that.
Yeah, it's part of human psychology, and that's probably why it sold so much. And again, it was overdue by 5 years, so there's that.
It was.
But I saw a sign. I know you don't want to. You said you don't want to comment on Mayweather personally, and that's fine. But I saw a sign that Pacquiao tweeted out. He had a sign that said, tell Mayweather that in the ring he has to hit me, or he has to hit me in the ring and hug his wife outside of the ring, And it was, of course, that's like a reference to his domestic violence arrests and all that.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was just really lame, It's just like, look, Mayweather won, suck it up, deal with it. And maybe he didn't win in the most exciting way, but it's just, that's when I lost a good deal of respect for Pacquiao when I saw him holding that up. Because Pacquiao wasn't there. None of us was there. We don't know what happened to it's the same thing with Tyson, right? He got arrested and convicted of rape, but turns out there was like some woman who voluntarily went up to his room at like 3 a.m. and a couple hours later she was like partying. They had her on videotape partying and stuff like that. Yeah. Who partied
she had
after
previous false rape accusation, didn't she?
I'm not sure. I don't remember the exact details of the case, but it was very fishy, And I think that's just a way that society loves to take away accomplishments like great men.
Oh, yeah.
And they just love to destroy great men. I mean, I don't know what happened with the whole Bill Cosby fiasco, but
yeah, that was disgusting.
You see how the media is just kind of just gnashing at the teeth. They just love to see a great man destroyed. Right? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's the internal script that we run. It's that we're constantly telling ourselves that men are the problem in society. That men don't have feelings. It's a constant process of dehumanization, and from my perspective, it's worsening. It's getting to the point where men are portrayed solely as villains, and that's going to lead to all kinds of actions towards men and towards boys as well. You can look at the process of circumcision. Now, my question is, why don't we see what happens behind closed doors? Yeah. We never get an insight into that. Whenever it's brought up, it's just swept under the carpet. I can't understand that.
I saw a couple of high-profile cases where a boy who was mutilated, 18 years old, I guess a young man who was mutilated during circumcision when he was an infant. Finally, he committed suicide because of that. And it's just like these are completely elective procedures. There's just, I just don't understand why we need to take, what is the point of it? I just don't understand. We could do away with circumcision completely, and there's no drastic like health differences regarding circumcision or reproductive health between men in America and men in Europe, where circumcision is much more prevalent. We could really do away with it completely and altogether, couldn't we?
Absolutely. It's a barbaric act, and I don't see any use to it. And it leaves a lot of deep psychological scars as well. It destroys your trust right from the get-go, that you're mutilated. And at the same time, if you even bring it up, I don't know if you've ever seen this in real life, but I have, sitting across the table and a man actually brings it up. Other men will jump in. They'll say, man up. The whole thing. The woman will deride him because of it. So imagine how that feels.
Yeah. It conditions you. It conditions you to not complain when you're suffering, when you're vulnerable, right? And the saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and it's no wonder. It's no wonder that women get more attention when they complain. Of course, they have biology and all that, working for them as well. But if men
Sure.
can't even form their mouths to complain, right? If they
Yeah.
can't even fix their mouths to express, when they're suffering, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, even more so than what biology causes, right? I mean, it's going to lead to all sorts of dysfunction, and this goes back to like violent men. We were talking about this the other day. Is it's easy to speculate on people that commit, especially boys that commit violent acts. And I remember Michael Moore tweeted when this whole Virginia Tech massacre happened. I think it was the Virginia Tech fiasco. It might have actually been Elliot Rodgers. I don't know. But, they were saying, well, notice all of these shootings are from young boys. We have to confront, like, young male violence or something like that. And it's like, well, what would have happened? We talked about how in any society there's probably a good portion of society that is right on the brink of some sort of psychopathic activity, like a portion of it, a very small portion of it, right? But a boy who might even be capable of violent acts or whatever, who lives in this society that is heavily misandric towards him, right? Who's to say that when he's treated in a way where he can't express his vulnerabilities or what have you, who's to say that misandry in our society for some boys, and I want to be very careful here when I phrase this, a very small portion of the male population is a triggering incident, right? Where it puts them over the edge. I mean, they say Hitler was rejected from art school or something,
Yeah.
So it's like, and this is for boys and girls, right? Men and women. The population, both men and women of any nation or country or region, is going to have some people that are capable of desperate acts of violence, and depending on how that society treats the target groups of where these psychopaths may reside, is whether or not you're going to see that's the result that you're going to get. Right?
Oh,
some of these people are going to be triggered, or if you treat these people or dehumanize them in any way, it's the catalyst for sometimes some very violent behaviors. Our society tends to treat women with kitten gloves or whatever, and they tend to attend to every need or complaint that women may have. So of course you're going to have less violence from women. Right, but even still, with all that said, and the way we kind of excuse female behavior, women are still, in some studies I've seen that they're even more prone to domestic violence and things of that nature. So imagine if we started ignoring women and just letting them figure out the way we do men, we'd probably see an explosion of violence, right?
Oh yeah. What's the thing with women is women can get away with it, and they can manipulate other men into acting for them. But you're absolutely right. People want to attribute blame to a male with just one quick, easy stroke of the brush, stroke of the pen, saying that it was because of this. He was rejected by women, thus he's acting this way. No, it's a build-up throughout an entire lifetime. And if you look at my my latest videos, male solitude, male grief, hurt, the boy made out of glass. I mean, they had a very strong reaction with a lot of men, and we're seeing more men opening up. In the comment section, you're seeing this now. We didn't see this a year ago. We're seeing more men willing to share their experiences in comments and also private messages, and they're claiming now they're right to express vulnerability, and to claim their experiences as valid. And there's no deflection. There's no reframing of these experiences. They're stating it clearly. They suffered. They were hurt. And that experience it demands to be heard and to be accepted as valid. So, men are now stating their convictions like you did in the post-feminism man, and they're standing by them. Yeah. And you have a man now, like me. I'll say it out now. I don't actively pursue sex. That's my conviction. Yeah. I don't feel any hesitation or shame in saying that. Yeah. So there's been a definite shift in men actually claiming their sovereignty.
Yeah. Well, look, it's like it's like the issue with the male virgin, right? I've been seeing this
Yeah,
where
yeah, me
men
too.
are now admitting sometimes, right?
Hmm.
Like on MGTOW comment section, because as you know, we've had certain I'm not going to say who, but people's MGTOW are just virgins, the standard shaming tactics or whatever.
Yeah.
Some people even in the manosphere, and you're starting to see that there's some men that just say, you know what, I am a virgin, so what,
Mm, mm,
and it's really an amazing thing to see. And like you said, we didn't see this a year ago, right?
no, and
Men are
yeah,
no longer ashamed, right? So if they've never had sex with a woman, big deal, And
mm,
I just think that's like a monumental thing.
yeah, and they can't take it and they can't use it against you because you've claimed it. So
Yeah,
yes, that's my conviction, that's my experience.
sure.
You can't take that and turn that against someone. They've got ownership of that.
Yeah.
So it's a very powerful thing. And yeah, I think with my videos, that I've said this before. I don't think I'm saying anything that men don't already know. And men are having a reaction to it, to my content, not because it's unknown, but because it's familiar. They actually recognize the experience or the situation I'm describing, and same with your videos as well. But you do open men's minds to a lot of different concepts, both you and Stardust. Um, but I think that for all our openness online at the present, there's still so much that's left unsaid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about women, about having sex with women, having interactions with women. From my experiences, as being like a violent collision. Really violent in nature, like it's a testing ritual rather than an experience of intimacy. But how many men have actually said that out loud? Not many, and that's why my content resonates with men. I've reflected back to them their own experience, but every man's experience is going to be different. But there's a lot of men that identify strongly with the material we present. I could talk about violent collision between men and women. A man may not identify with that, but if I referred to it as a parasitic codependency between a man and a woman, that man would instantly recognize what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I want to ask you one of the questions here was in regard. Let me see if I can find it. It's in regards to the sexual abuse of men and boys and how you think that they can deal with that, and that's a complicated question that I know I don't have an answer to. Let me see
Sure.
if I can. Let's see. Man, I had it just here.
Mm. I could talk about it
Well,
if you want.
yeah, why don't you start talking about it? Like, how would you
Mm.
how do we approach men and boys that for whatever reason, I'm sure you might have seen this in the prison system where men unfortunately are victims of rape,
Mm.
at a very high rate sometimes.
Yeah,
How do we deal with men that have been victims of sexual abuse?
sure. Um, in the prison environment, it's a bit different because there's literally nothing we can do, and there's so much bureaucracy and bullshit in the way, and that a lot of times when they get assaulted, the actual victimizer, he'll stay put, and the actual victim will get shifted in solitary confinement. They call it segregation, but that's what it is. It's solitary
Well,
confinement.
go into detail if you can. Like what you say, there's
Mm,
bureaucracy. Like give us a breakdown since I have no experience with this whatsoever.
mm,
So
mm.
how is prison rape treated in the prison system from your observations?
Well, it depends on which country you're in. I mean, if Australasian prisons, they don't even acknowledge its existence, and rape is a severe form of violence, sexual violence. But there's a lot of sexual harassment. I mean, there's a lot of sexual abuse. So a lot of encroachment on men's personal space and all the rest of it. But essentially, the process is there's no incentive for prison management to do anything about it. And the actual process of making a formal complaint saying that you were sexually assaulted, well, there's a real risk of that being reinterpreted as you're engaging in consensual sexual acts with another man, which in itself is a violation of prison standards, prison rules. And as a result of that, you can lose privileges. And what's the easier route for prison management?
Yeah.
And they're going to do what they have to do. Why? Because there's a definite strata within the prison environment, a social strata in terms of hierarchy. So it makes sense to make the more established prisoners, the ones with more more backup, who've got more power within the prison system, to actually appease them, to keep them happy. So are we going to take them out of the prison environment, throw them into solitary? No, absolutely not. You're going to increase disruption. So
yeah. Well, that's kind of well, we hear a lot about how rape culture exists, right, and how we in the I guess the patriarchy re-victimizes the victim, but this is an instance here where men are being re-victimized. They're victims of rape, and they're just kind of expected to just figure it out, right? And who cares? Because they're prisoners, they're criminals anyway, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's no intervention on behalf of these men. It's especially bad in the American prison system. It is brutal, and you can only look at it from the perspective that this is deliberate. They want to enforce this kind of culture. They want to appease the high status prisoners, and they want to feed them. These guys are coming on just minor violations. Could be who didn't pay his child support. Why? Because it literally exceeds his income. So he's in on his first lick, and he gets fed to the dogs, basically. And there's massive overcrowding in American prisons as well. So that it's a definite culture where men are being punished, but I hesitate to say it, the wrong men are being punished. That's not appropriate. But what I'm saying is that you've got guys coming on the first bid. And they're the ones that are being damaged beyond repair. Yeah. And you're breeding this environment where men are essentially preying on one another. And you can look at people. I've had discussions with people from the gay lobby, gay rights lobby, and their perspective is no, we don't care about them. So that's always been very interesting to me. Yeah. This is one area of society where men are being brutalized, and gay men especially. Yeah. Or men that are deemed effeminate, not strong enough. So. Yeah, that's very interesting to me. And
well, I think what it is there's no political clout to be gained. In fact, it's politically risky to defend men that are victims of rape in the prison system. There's no benefit to it, right? And as you know, pretty much worldwide, or at least throughout the West, the gay political movement, for lack of a better word, is very powerful and very organized. Yeah, right, but mum's the word on male prison rape, and it's very unfortunate, but that's the way it is, because it's politically risky to do so, and you certainly aren't going to see any feminists or women lining up to champion the cause of fighting male on male rape. It's kind of it's acceptable to leave men to kind of just stagnate and suffer. And when they get out of prison, they are carrying around the distinct impression that they were raped in prison and nobody did anything to stop it or help them in any way. And how do you think, Spetsnaz, that filters into society as these people, when these people are free men, right? Yeah. This is going to create extremely violent, extremely dangerous individuals, because they're getting back at society. And, can we really blame them? I'm not advocating violence or anything like that, but when somebody is just kind of ignored, right? And men, I'm sure they see this hyperfixation that we place on women being raped, right? Or violence against women, to the point where we have videos now talking about catcalling is sexual harassment, right? So we see, so these men see this hypersensitivity towards even the most inane, just harmless things like catcalling on the streets, right? They see all the stops are pulled out to fight sexual violence against women, and they see that men are kind of tossed to the side. That creates anger. That creates feelings of worthlessness. I remember seeing a episode of the popular. Have you ever seen the show Sons of Anarchy? Or
oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so The creator, I can't remember his name. You know, the guy who went blind.
From The Shield. I can't remember his name. Yeah.
I love The Shield. I love that's a great
Yeah.
show.
That's a great show. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, the writer of the show, the Sons of Anarchy show, he had long ponytail. He was
Yeah, I know the guy. Yeah.
yeah, he was like, I mean, they show just like straight up violent, real, hyper realistic scenes of men getting raped in that series, right? And here we are. You can't have in terms of Gamergate, you can't have a cover where even themes of suggesting violence against women. There was a famous incident just a couple of months ago where there was a Batgirl comic book cover where they had the Joker. She was like gagged or whatever, and he had his arm around her with a pistol. And feminists just went crazy and demanded that it got removed, and it eventually, I think, did get removed. So you see this hypersensitivity towards male on female rape. But you know, how do you think it makes these men feel? Right? How do you think it makes men feel to know that they're a part of selective service and nobody else is going to be?
And I know from some of the guys I work with, I've worked with a lot of veterans as well, but that was on a personal basis. That was actually helping me. But like prisoner mates have said to me, because they go out, they do their lick, you know, they go back out into society, put them in a monkey suit, and they hold down a job, 9 to 5 to get a girlfriend, what have you, and that goes well for about 3 to 6 months max. And then they go into the nearest bar, they see someone look at them outside of the neck, and they just bash him, turn his face into burger. Yeah. And then you ask him, so, well, what are you doing back here? What happened? And so I went stir crazy. So you went stir crazy on the outside?
No.
I said, no, I don't believe that. Tell me what happened. And it goes back to them, you know, they've internalized all of it and they have no strategy to cope. So you put men in a prison environment who have been traumatized, who don't understand what happens inside their own physiology, why they're reacting, and we brutalize them more. And them around other prisoners who are going to teach them how to be better criminals outside society, manipulate people. They grow up in this culture, then you release them back into the community with no strategies to cope. So they're going to want a way back in, where they have power, where they have status. So it's ridiculous. It's just this flow.
Maybe I think there's something to that though. Probably not completely, but maybe they did go stir crazy. I talked in a video. To a degree. I talked in a video about, you've seen the movie Hurt Locker or no?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you remember the character, he was like a bomb technician. Yeah. He was the guy that they sent to defuse the IEDs in Iraq or whatever. And, you know, he finally got back after doing all sorts of tours. And, you know, this guy really only felt alive when he was in the thick of it, right? In this like extremely dangerous and extremely violent situation, and he got back to his wife, and just the boredom got to him. But at the same time, with the people in prison, the men in prison, I suspect that it's very easy to get used to a highly regimented, structured, you know, existence, even if it is at times very violent. But at least, you know, you don't have to think about how you're going to put your next meal in your mouth, right?
Yeah. I've had guys turn up on my doorstep, guys that have just been released. They turn tattoos all over the face. They go, you know, big rough guys, and they're standing with me on the doorstep. I don't want to bring them inside the house. Yeah. I say, okay, well, we're going to have a conversation on the doorstep. That's fine. But they go out, I'm lost. I don't know what to do, mate. I don't know how to go on with my life and blah, blah, blah. They're not saying it directly, but that's what they're alluding to.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm one of their only sources of stability. They recognize me. I come from that environment.
Yeah.
So it's very sad to see. And these are men that you'd think it would happen with older convicts. No, it happens with younger guys too. It's what they're used to. Yeah. And they're asking for direction. They're asking for help. And there's only so much they can do. Yeah. So,
well,
we haven't got the resources available.
Yeah. And they kind of turn them loose with I think $100 and just tell them to figure it out, or is that the case?
Yeah. Well, not quite that, but yeah. They send them to local social welfare office and all the rest of it. The clothes on their back, and Yeah, they don't get much. If they don't have an abode, they get set up at the shelter.
So they're basically turning these guys loose to be homeless, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. And you see these guys, they fall apart. They'll hold it down for a little while, and then you'll be walking through the city and you'll see them on a park bench. They'll be, hitting the alcohol, or they'll be up to no good. You can see it. You can see them breaking at the seams.
Yeah. Well, then let me ask you this then, because this is a controversial issue in the manosphere, right? If you say that, for example, we should maybe dig into the taxpayer, the taxpayer, like, we dig into our taxpayer coffers or whatever, and provide something to these men, right? You're going to be called like a raving communist. So what do you propose? Like, what is a solution? Do you think that maybe we should consider maybe funding taxpayer, I guess, reintegration centers, or would that kind of go to shit in terms of the PC that would probably be inundated with? I mean, I've given a lot of thought to this, and I can't find a solution. Right? It's certainly not, cut any and all programs that are designed to help these men, because then they just end up going on the streets and committing crime to put food in their mouths. So, where in terms of a systemic societal level, if you were in charge of, the budget of America or Australia or New Zealand, whatever, how do we structure something to help these guys?
Sure. Well, what do they say? They say, if you give food to the poor, you're seen as a hero. If you ask why the poor don't have food, you're seen as a communist.
Sure.
But in terms of, mate, I don't see it as any different than what we're trying to establish now online. No. Every man has value. I don't care if he's a rapist. I don't care if he's a murderer. I don't care if he's a pedophile. It doesn't mean that they should ever be released, but that man has value. He can have value within the environment that he's living in. And we need to see that value. But in terms of what we're building, from a very basic level, it's building up that network of support. It's men working with one another, working in tandem. But to do that, we need to be able to make that a possibility for men to be able to communicate. That this free exchange of ideas that we have, that I have with you, that I have with other men, that's dead in the water. We don't have that. No. I've seen at a very base level what this does to men when they start communicating with one another. I mean, when men talk, they talk in flux. If a guy and his wife's died or his child's died, God forbid, and you take him out for a weekend, you go fishing, whatever, there'll be little pockets where he opens up, where he'll say, this is the pain he's experiencing. He'll identify it. But then you'll move on. You move on to other activities. You'll focus on the task at hand. And there'll be silence. There'll be dialogue, but there'll be action. Yeah. But that's how men communicate. They interject humor as well. Like I say, humor is a social lubricant.
Sure. It's a coping mechanism.
It is, very much so. And I have a theory about that as well. In terms of why men employ humor. It's basically a testing process. It's seeing whether that man will be on the same level as them, whether they can trust that man. So, it defines boundaries. And if you're on the same wavelength in terms of humor, then you can build that trust. I've seen that. That happens all the time. Yeah. That's how men communicate. But from a very basic level, we need men communicating. And if we're going to understand men, we need to see it from their perspective. We're not doing that. And from a politician's point of view, they're never going to do that because that's not in their best interest.
Yeah.
We've got a prison system it's milking millions of dollars. We know that. We've got young children. I think in America you'd have a better insight on this, but young offenders who can be kept indefinitely or until the court or the judge deems they can be released. So a lot of people are making money off this.
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
With politicians as well. I just don't see any benefit for them to see it from a male perspective at present.
Well, I've seen like public defenders. I've had friends who have gotten into trouble with the law and stuff, and they tell you some of the public defenders, Jesus Christ, I mean, they do absolutely nothing to help these guys.
Oh yeah,
right. And
I've known a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and who cares? They're getting paid, right? So who gives a shit? It's interesting that you talked about that bit about humor. I don't remember which video it was in, but I mentioned something about these rituals that men have to kind of display to each other that they're not a threat. And I mentioned how I had a friend he was like timid, not shy, very smart, but we were jogging, and there was this guy, and he kind of like averted his gaze or whatever, and he saw that kind of I like when I see other men, I tend to like meet their gaze and maybe give them
Yeah.
like a head nod or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember
Yeah,
that one.
just to show that I'm not any threat or whatever, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. If he tries something, I'm not going to back down away from him, and it's really sad that we have to do that. But unfortunately, I think that it's a lot more effective in conveying that hidden body language and that hidden expression of connection than averting your gaze is, right? Why do you think that we build these rituals as men?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you think about why we wave at people, and you probably have a keen insight as to why we do that. But I can think of one friend in particular. He's a big man. He's a big, solid build, and he does everything he can to appear non-threatening to people. And he will pander to women all the time. Yeah. And he'll overreach. He'll try to be the sweetest guy you can imagine. But he carries so much tension inside his body all the time.
Yeah.
And because he's got to hold it all in, he doesn't let himself feel it. But he waves at people more often than I know anybody else. It's just always that bare palm. I'm not a threat.
Yeah.
I'm not a threat to you. I will not. I come in peace.
Yeah. Well, I think with very, very large men, that kind of people fear very, very large men.
Yeah.
They're it's like I mean, almost they view them as like a slightly more civilized bear without a leash or a muzzle. Like it's or I don't know. Okay, here's a good analogy. You ever been walking around and you just see like a loose pit bull that looks friendly, but you're still. This is the psychology behind it. I'm not justifying it by any stretch of the imagination, but when you see very, very large men, society just freaks the fuck out, and it's almost like the character Lenny in Of Mice and Men, right? Where he just his own friend was scared to like let him kind of associate with anybody, and particularly he said Percy's wife, right? The man, the woman that he eventually killed and had to be killed because of that by his best friend. And it's just like I'm not calling your friend like mentally unstable, because that's as Lenny was.
That's
but
fine.
but it's just like they have this guard, right? And that's just part of the correlation between masculinity, physical masculinity, and dehumanization that society puts onto men. The more capacity for violence that you have, the more likely you are, I think, to be dehumanized by society, just by virtue of the fact that if you wanted to, you could do some major damage.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move on, Spetsnaz, to the topic of I know somebody asked for I'm going to say it here, a brief description of what Systema is and how you have incorporated it into your life and the benefits you've derived.
Okay, sure. Well, I've been doing Systema probably for how many years now? It's quite a few years now. Just from my approach, it's helped me tenfold, and basically identifying things within my own physiology, things within my own life. Because basically, when you break down Systema, basically the key tenets or the key principles, it's focused entirely on helping you identify your fear. And fear itself, it manifests in many different ways. You know the consequences of it. It limits your growth. It restricts you. I remember one of the first sessions I ever did. The trainer, he was actually ex-Spetsnaz. He's an amazing guy, tough, hard nut.
So he was actually like a real like Russian Spetsnaz military.
Yeah, he was in Melbourne. That was when I was in Melbourne. Yeah, he was a hard nut. He had his perspective on life was just completely polar opposite to mine at the time. Very traditional guy. Believed very heavily in the Russian Orthodox faith, and also the principles of marriage and all the rest of it. So we had quite a few interesting conversations. But one of his first sessions, we came in all gearing up. We were ready to get into martial arts because I came from a boxing background. So I thought, okay, let's rip. Mm-hmm. And he basically sat us all down and he got us to identify where our fear is inside our body. And we did that. And men would point at their shoulders, they'd point at the chest or their arms or whatever. For whatever reason, they may have experienced trauma or an accident in the past, or they felt their body was underdeveloped. With me, it was my legs, because when I came out of the coma, they were the last things to wake up. And as a result, they'd never been as strong and they'd never gotten back the true flexibility they had before the coma. So I felt that in a conflict situation or a survival situation, I'd fail. I wouldn't be able to, defend myself. But when you identify that fear, what that essentially is tension. It's tension inside your body. And you can try and hold down that fear. You can try and suppress it, but it will come out. It will start manifesting itself as aggression. And, the link is that aggression and fear are the same thing. And the more aggression equals more fear. Yeah. So you can't be afraid of that. Just like you can't be afraid of anger. Of yours or anyone else's, because all it is just another form of fear, if it's being channeled in an aggressive way, and you can't overcome fear with more aggression, because we all know anger is a cover emotion. Yeah. And if you respond with aggression or violence, if you're living in that space day in, day out, it's going to destroy you. And the fallout from that, it's going to have huge impact on your life and on your opportunities. And so the base essence, the basis of Systema, you're trying to achieve freedom. You're trying to become free from fear. So recognizing fear, finding a tool inside yourself from your toolkit. We've all got a toolkit of strategies that we can develop and employ, to reduce the fear, to lessen the impact on your body. And you do a lot of that through twisting movements, through striking each other with closed fists, through your breathing, especially. Yep. If your attention, if your focus, if it's all internal, then you'll understand what's happening within your body. If your attention is directed outwards, then you won't recognize it. You won't recognize that fear, and you won't look inside. And if you don't do that, if you don't look inside, if you don't become introspective, you can't overcome these emotions. And they're very disruptive to your life. So you've got to cleanse yourself. It's a cleansing process of just fear, of anger, pride, and any other emotions that limit you or damage you. Because Systema, in another translation, actually means know yourself. So it's about finding yourself. And from my perspective, it's a perfect extension of men going their own way. Yeah. So I think we're going for the same approach, sort of analysis.
I think that in a lot of ways, MGTOW, we're given a name to something that's been around for a very long time, hasn't it? I mean, we're just defining something in a new way. MGTOW is such a. Sometimes I look back and I wish we just never even use these words, because it was something that was already, something that was already in the lexicology of the manosphere, and so it's like forever bonded to that, and now we have to, like, every time this stupid traditionalist manifesto props up, we have to kind of distance ourselves from that. But I wish we would have just named it something else, because frankly, it's been around. This is just the pursuit of knowledge, right? This is the pursuit of knowledge. And the applying that to your own life and your own identity and development. What have you learned, Spetsnaz, since? I'm not going to ask you about details of the coma unless you want to talk about that specifically. But what have you learned since then, and embracing Systema, like in terms of your identity? If somebody asked you what is your identity personified or put into words since that happened? What would you tell them?
I'd say I'm on the inside looking out, and what I mean on the inside, I'm understanding where my weaknesses are, where my limitations are. I'm not focused on competition. That's not a part of my life. And like with many men who go their own way, they come to a point where they drop this need for validation, and that's fantastic. It's a wonderful thing. But then from that perspective, from that point onward, how do you define yourself? Because what's left is a big void. And for me, that void it came from a place where I didn't have any kind of network of support with other men. That was a huge, huge loss to me growing up. All I had was men testing me all the time, 24/7. That was for me to fall in line to play ball, so they could trust me, so they knew I wouldn't narc on them, that I'd have their back in conflict, or that I wasn't direct competition. I'd find other strategies to adapt. So for me, it's all about accepting what I will and won't accept by having intrinsic knowledge of my own physiology, knowledge of my own psychology, and what my goals are, and not making any kind of apologies for wanting to move towards those goals, and utilizing that network of support with other men. That's me.
What have you at some point had to? Well, I'm assuming you have. I mean, you've had to tell somebody no. Do you want to give like a quick anecdote in terms of like what you were unwilling to accept since discovering men going their own way in your personal life?
Sure. There's different strategies that you can employ. Now, I'll do this with a friend, but I've done it countless times in business. This is the opposite technique of social exchange. Social exchange is basically holding someone accountable for a wrong that they perpetrated on you in the past, or somehow they let you down, and you hold them accountant for that. So, okay, you owe me, but that just builds resentment. There's different strategies you can employ. Like one is complete opposite of that. You're basically saying to someone that, you create a situation that doesn't exist. You create a problem, and you basically go out of your way to rectify this problem. You go overboard and rectify this, and this builds loyalty. I've done this countless times in business. The problems, but I made them believe it existed. Then I overcome it, and I go overboard in my apology. So they think that he goes overboard for this minor infraction, for this little thing, this little betrayal.
Yeah. Then
what will he do if numerous times? And what that does is
Spets. I don't know if you seem to be like cutting out a little bit. Just maybe give it like a second and then just continue. Just continue from here on out. I don't know if we'll see if it's still happening.
Sure. Yeah. No, I was just saying that I've used this technique countless times in the past. You create a situation. You foster a small betrayal, and by doing that, you go overboard in your apology, and by doing that, you create loyalty. They think that you go the extra mile if something does happen. So I've utilized many times in the business world, and I think many times in life, we as men, we're stuck on this one little narrow path that we think we need to travel down this one little line, and we can't go outside the perimeters. And that's not true, because you can talk to a guy who's got a $9 million property portfolio, and you scratch your head and you wonder how he did it. But you talk to him, and he'll tell you how. You put him in the position of mentor, and the way he did it was thinking outside the box. It's the difference between learned helplessness. That experiment. So I actually saw a comment in the comment section asking about psychological experiments. But this was the one where electric shocks were transmitted to a dog. And then they put that dog inside a box. And it was a box that dog could easily jump out of. But he chose not to. He just lay there prone. So they conditioned him to have that response, so he wouldn't proactively do something to change his situation. And I think there's many men in that box right now. Say, for instance, if you went into a gym, New Year's resolution, you want to drop some weight, you had an idea of what you wanted to achieve. Now, you could go through all the steps to trial and error, and failure is an opportunity to learn, but why do you need to fail 1,000 times before you get it right? Why not go up to the guy in the gym who looks like you want to look like, tap him on the shoulder and say, show me.
Yeah. Well,
Let's engage together. Yeah.
there's like that psychological barrier that men are kind of conditioned never to ask other men for help because they see
Mm.
themselves as becoming subordinate to that man by virtue of just the act of asking for help. It's extremely disruptive.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's extremely disruptive, right? I mean,
Yeah.
imagine that, right? Imagine, well, just take women for example. Let's say we somehow made it socially unacceptable for women to ask each other for help, right? They'd be
Yeah.
running around like it'd be just a complete disaster, right? I mean, I mean,
Absolutely.
just think of how much knowledge is shared between women. Unfortunately, the vast majority of that knowledge is geared towards finding ways to like manipulate men. But I
Yes.
mean, I think that women would be going batshit insane if like I think we hold up to that society wide I guess convention of not being able to ask for help a
Yeah.
lot better than women would be able to. But even still, like imagine a male I guess renaissance where it became acceptable to ask other men for help. Imagine how that would change the
Mm.
world. I mean, the
Yeah.
world would never be the same again.
No. And you made a statement in one of your videos. I think if we harnessed the knowledge and the capacity of men, I can't remember what phrase you used, but it said if we could harness that amount of force, we could change the world.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, look.
I
This
mean,
is
yeah.
even on the scale of just right nations, right?
Mm.
When men are harnessed, right? Unfortunately, at this point, Spetsnaz, we've only really been able to harness male drive by attaching it to like reproduction, women, and all that. But
Mm.
I frankly, I don't have all the answers. None of us do. But
Sure.
if we could if we could possibly take men and figure out a way to get them to act in benefit of themselves and harness
Mm.
their instinct for self-preservation and wanting to live a life of relative comfort and safety and even luxury.
Mm.
I think we do, if we could just figure that out, right? But at the same time, that's like saying if we could just figure cold fusion out. I mean, it's extremely
Yeah.
difficult, and
It's interesting. I mean, at present, if we're looking online, just the online example, or outside, as men, we don't have a full network of support net yet, and it's a process of establishing identity. What we're seeing online at the moment, and I mean, I'm a bit behind the eight ball when it comes to watching content, and I apologise because I've been very busy. But yeah, some people they label it as infighting. But I don't see it as such. It's a seeking of where the parameters are. What defines me? Who can I trust? Who's my enemy? Because men will always test one another, even if it's in jest.
yeah.
But it's a very positive thing we have now. It's men stating what they will and won't accept, and they're clearly laying out what's acceptable for them. And we didn't have that before. So men being more forthright now. From that comes strength. From that. They express and then they apply those principles to their life.
Well,
And
I think that.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
Oh no, I was just saying we've all gone through the same process.
Yeah.
I still am. I look at a situation, I judge it, and I think no, that doesn't fit in with my value system. So I'm not conforming. And why would I when someone else's opinion of me or their validation means nothing to me? So
Well, I want to talk about the infighting, and it's going to be
okay,
controversial, but whatever. These things have to be addressed, and that's part of what men going their own way. What makes men going their own way special is that we're not afraid to shy away from controversy if
sure,
knowledge can be derived from it, right?
sure,
But I guess a lot of people in MGTOW, when they see the infighting going on and all of that, they say, "Oh, I'm tired of this. Why can't we just focus on positive things or whatever?" And I always thought that kind of is like reflective of like almost like a female deflectionary tactic. I'm not trying to
mm,
insult these men and call them female, but
no,
it's important that men don't shy away from conflict in
oh, absolutely,
MGTOW because what if we just become this kind of watered down, meaningless just everybody's egalitarian, just nothingness, right? I mean, at least we have an identity now, and at least we have some kind of structure to the identity. I liken it more to like, scientists have found a way to like, if you drop the temperature of matter or atoms or whatever, atomic particles low enough, they form this weird kind of state of matter that's kind of like an amalgam of all of that. MGTOW can kind of exist in flux in that matter, but it also can have some boundaries, right? And it can lock up. And I think this is when like topics like marriage that can be extremely disruptive. We talked about man-woman myth and how it's potentially, I'm assuming maybe it's possible his wife told him that she doesn't want his content up anymore. And so one of the greatest, minds to ever
absolutely.
To ever join the manosphere may have had to remove his content because his wife doesn't want it up, right? And if he refuses to do that, what happens? Well, there's several options. She can choose to divorce him, and she can use all of that as evidence in court against him. So this is the potential for some very, very bad consequences for somebody like man-woman myth. So where do you fall on the controversy, marriage? Women, this recent, like, I guess, conflict with the MRAs. I'm just going to give you the floor and let you talk about whatever you want to address.
Why don't you just throw everything at me? For me, not it. No, that's fine. But I mean, I don't want to make light of it because there's a lot of men. They're sending me a lot of messages. I'm sure you receive them too, and they're feeling. How do they interact with women? What can they do? What are the parameters are? How can they interact and still keep safe? Which is a fair enough question. And men ask, can they be in a relationship? Yeah, of course you can, because you deserve affection, you deserve love. But the first question is, and it's the question I always put to any man from any walk of life, is what you're chasing worth it? Will that person add value to your life? And if so, great. But what tools do you have to make it work? What tools do they have? And what have you identified in terms of what motivates your behavior, what drives your reactions? I mean, there's no easy answer. I mean, if you want something, you have to work for it. Because we are talking about your well-being here. We're talking about your future. We're talking about your finances, your freedom. And for some men, I mean, they think they can just have their cake and not have to put in the spade work to earn it. But nothing in life, nothing worth anything comes easy. And men need to look around. They need to realize the reality that they're living in. And you can have a man calling himself a man going his own way. But if he's still going through the same motions, if he's still flying blind, if he's not aware, not self-aware, then he's always going to get what he's always gotten. And that's terrible English, but if you want affection, if you want love, in this climate of misinjury, then you're going to have to fucking earn it. You're going to have to do the inner work. You're going to have to identify what makes you and her tick and realize, man, it comes with a big price tag and a hell of a lot of risk. And men need to ask themselves, how has my interaction with women prior to this point in my life helped me? Yeah. How does it help me identify my goals or better me as a person? Because and touching on the infighting, I'm not 100% up on play of what's happening, but I do know that there is some conflict at the moment around women, either integrating into men going their own way or being present on podcasts or what have you. But we all know it. If women are present, then men will vie for their attention, and that stops dead in the water. Free exchange of ideas just stops it dead. And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I do feel that there's a difference between natural male competitiveness and the competition to procreate. And it can be argued that they're both moving in the same way.
I absolutely agree with you. As in fact, I've done a video where I kind of defined it as like healthy and destructive male versus male competition, right? Where like people like Michael Jordan, right, that kind of like uplift the whole team, right? Just by virtue of his excellence, but not really, I mean, women weren't really involved in it. And I'm in 100% agreement with that. Yeah.
Sure. Because I mean the one enables and the other subjugates men, and we've seen this. And I mean, we can't build men up if we're always focused on tearing them down. Tearing down other men to gain access to sex. And I mean, we've got to look at it rationally. I mean, I haven't seen much evidence of women displaying one iota of empathy, towards a male experience or male pain or loss on my channel. And I haven't seen it on your channel. I haven't seen any evidence of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a few exceptions. You know the exceptions, but you see it. The dialogue stops dead as soon as the spotlight is shone on female nature. And you can discuss, male nature is discussed at length, and it's demonized. And females, I mean, they feel free to judge. They feel free to admonish, or dictate how males should behave and conform. And you've touched on this before. A man can ascribe a title to himself, like alpha, and state he's going against the grain, or he's cheating the system. But the risks are still there. He's still seeking value. He's still seeking assurance through the eyes of a female. That's not freedom.
Oh. What do you think? What do you think about Women Against Feminism, the group?
I mean, they say feminism is a fuck you to your face, but traditionalism is just a smile with a fuck you behind it. That's exactly how I see it.
Yeah.
And I look at men and I think there's all that focus on being a marriage strike. The men are opting out. But it's not a marriage strike. It's a declaration of our sovereignty. And you have effectively backed us into a corner, and we're not willing to fight over scraps or accept any more misery or any more bullshit. I mean, the advances that I've made in the last few years were due entirely to me minimizing my interactions with women and gaining support from men. Yeah. And women, they prevent the free flow of ideas between men. That's the key. Yeah. That's, my perspective.
It's almost, I mean, you could actually see, I think, and of course I'm confessing to a bias here, but you could actually see that there's certain groups like MGTOW, for example, that are kind of in this to kind of discover a new version of masculinity that isn't dependent on female validation, as opposed to like the other groups in the manosphere that are kind of working within old systems of thought. So we're talking about traditionalism, we're talking about the PUAs or whatever. You could see kind of almost a distinct difference in terms of how much these groups individually attack other men, specifically men they perceive to be rejecting gynocentrism. I don't know if you've noticed this, Spetsnaz, but do you notice that the PUAs, the traditionalists, etc., they will get visibly angry at men who say they've sworn off women? I mean, they get literally mad, like mad to the point where if we were together and they say this, they'd probably want to fight us, like, right? Yeah. So what do you think causes this? What do you think causes these men? Because these are men, of course, right? Nobody's forcing anybody to go their own way. Why do some of these men, like Aaron Clary or whoever, why do they get so angry when they see that men are, rejecting gynocentrism and not wanting to be divided? Like, why do they go on these tangents talking about, oh, well, if you've never had experience with women, then you can't be a MGTOW, right? That kind of stuff. Where do you think the genesis of that lies?
Sure. I look at it and I see a different dynamic with men going their own way, just in their approach. Now, there's always going to be exceptions, but I've seen it in groups as well, that there'll be one man who, well, I'll put it this way. If you go into a group setting with a group of men, and say you're just a participant rather than facilitator, you sit down and you challenge concepts, and I've done this. I'm not the person you want in a group, because if I feel things aren't working, I'll speak up. But say you get me, I speak out, and you'll get the majority of men sitting silent. You'll get one man that comes at me, and he'll come at me hard. You'll get two other guys that will maybe take sides with me, but they won't speak up. They'll say a few few things. They'll nod most of the time. They'll understand my perspective. But you see with guys, men going their own way, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it's true. They're more malleable and they have a natural curiosity. And what I mean by that is they're more open. They haven't got their heels dug into the ground. They see that, this is a situation so far, the way I've lived my life, it hasn't benefited me. So I need to adapt. I need to make changes. And that shows someone with a very healthy perspective on life, someone who is adaptable. Yeah. It's a survival strategy. These men, they get so angry and viscerally angry towards men going their own way. You're literally stripping them of their identity. You're holding up a mirror to them. Yeah. You're saying, this is the truth. This is you. And this is what happened when I saw your video, The Post-Feminism Man. That was the exact reaction I had. You're holding up a mirror to me, and I didn't like it because it was very ugly. Yeah. You upset my apple cart. Yeah. I was going with a girl at the time, and what you did is you reflected everything back to me, subconsciously, that I already knew. Because all of us, as men, we already have the answers. Yeah. We do. It's like what I say in my videos. When I say something, it's familiar. So have the ability to recognize that. So do they. Yeah. They know instinctively, intrinsically, that we're right. Yeah. And if you do that, that strips away their identity to the core. And that's a horrible position to be in. I know because I've been there. Yeah. And they're not willing. They're not willing to take that extra step. It's too much. No.
Well, it's been 2 hours, Spetsnaz. Is there anything else that you want to address before we wrap things up? And again, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. Sure. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Do you have any questions for me?
Oh, I have plenty of questions for you. But I think we could save them for another time. Sure. And maybe we could turn the shoe on the other foot next time, and I could ask you a few questions. No, but you've got quite a keen insight on what's happening on the online sphere, so I think you could point me in the right direction with a few other things, because I want to get more interactive online as well. I've stayed away from the manosphere for since I've been making videos. So
let me just chime in here and say, sometimes that's a good thing. It lets you think more clearly.
Yeah. If I'm expecting men to reach out to one another, then I've got to do it too.
Sure.
So there's a mutual responsibility there, and we have a duty of care to each other, our brothers. So,
I'm gonna stop the recording now, but I'll just chat with you a little bit more if that's all right.
Sure.
Yeah.